We have a guest in the studio, and of course, he's what I'd call semi-regular. That's only because he alternates with some of the other people at the office. But on a weekly basis, we call it Tripp Family Medicine, Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine, right here on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Dr. Jonathan Tripp joining us this morning in the studio. First of all, welcome back.
Thank you.
You look very casual today.
Well, I'm living at 100-degree weather, and I think the rest of us know a little bit about being casual in Idaho is okay.
I remember the one day you came in because you had been on your way to the temple, and you were dressed in, well, I can't afford a suit like that, but
Yeah, suit and tie, white shirt, had the whole looked pretty East Coast formal.
I was
Yeah,
going to say you were running for office that day.
that's
That's what
right.
it that's what it appeared like. Hey, you're here today to talk with us a little bit about some trends in medicine,
Yeah.
which I guess a lot of us don't realize that things change and new science and new things develop.
Yep. Well, actually, what spurred this topic was we had a caller a couple of weeks ago that had a question about. Well, the specific question had to do with uh, butter versus margarine and how, you can't figure out what the medical profession wants us to eat and, why one was great and now it's bad and the other one's okay. And so I thought, well, that's a great topic is just to say, where do we go with these trends? How do they come up? And a lot of times the trends are driven by what's going on in, popular society, sometimes, by the medical profession, and often there's a doctor's name behind whatever the latest trend is. So, you could say it's a medical trend, but a lot of times it's an author of a book about the latest and greatest diet or, the best way to exercise or, what you need for adequate sleep. But we've got quite a few topics I wanted to bring up. Um, but I'd really want to encourage callers right from the get-go to help us out because uh, things that you'll have personal experience with. We'd love to hear about what's worked, what hasn't, and I'll start off by hitting diets. The trans fat is a big topic right now. The FDA just had a ruling, talking about how they're trying to reduce or get rid of that in our diet, and how that trans fat, as most of you to understand, is Crisco. So Crisco came out in the 50s as oleo, and in the old days you have to mix the oil with the white stuff to make it look yellow, so it kind of looked like butter. And so some of you will remember that. But the truth is that has become more and more prevalent in our processed foods. And
Microwave popcorn, for instance, often has it.
yeah, it's peanut butter. I grew up on peanut butter with it's called partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. That's a trans fat. It's what makes an oil stay solid at room temperature. So, I've now switched to peanut butter because I'm a peanut butter lover, that doesn't have that, and so I have to stir it and put it in the fridge. And I actually now prefer that. But, when I was a kid, oh my goodness, give me Skippy, give me Jif, give me,
Yeah.
Peter Pan peanut butter, but don't give me that natural crap, that's for old people. And so I really, have switched on that one. But, low carb diets have been big for a long time. Started, the biggest name is the Atkins diet. That's a no carb diet, actually. Right now, real popular one is called the paleo diet. Doctors for 10 years have been talking about a Mediterranean diet as being more heart healthy. And there's even things that we use to diet pills, over the counter or otherwise. Ephedra was pretty much outlawed about, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago. But there's lots of replacements for it. And, especially every spring, every, nutritional store has their brand or something on the radio, something on the TV about how you're going to lose 47 pounds in 21 days or whatever their claim is. These are some of the things that actually, those type of replacements, I'm going to have my physician assistant, Russell Singleton, talk about next week.
We've got about a minute before the break. We have a caller, and we can get at least a question or comment from the caller and then follow that up. You're on the air with Dr. Tripp on Top Story and, of course, Better Health.
I use cold press olive oil. I don't buy any other kind of anything. It's got a wonderful taste to it. I even put it on hot oatmeal with honey and cinnamon.
So what is the difference between the cold press olive oil and other olive oil?
I think it's the taste is what I notice. The extra virgin olive oil to me tastes yucky. So cold press oil is what I buy, and I don't allow any other vegetable oil or anything else in my house. I cook with it. I use it on salads. I use it on everything, and it's wonderful. And I'm healthier because of it.
Well, thank you for the call. We'll get back to that following the break. Doctor, it was I think a lot of people have decided that when it comes to cooking, they had to make some changes. And we have more coming up on that in just a few minutes. Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine this morning. On Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com. Dr. Jonathan Tripp in studio with us. And of course, Bill Colley taking the telephone calls. We've got plenty more ahead. Joining us in the studio, Dr. Jonathan Tripp from Tripp Family Medicine. Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine, Wednesday mornings between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. Right here on Top Story with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Of course, I always like to mention the location of your office. Fillmore Street's fairly simple to get to. Runs through most of the city. You're on the north end, across from the post office. But there's a lot of other ways to get in touch with the office than, let's say, just driving there.
You bet. We have a website, which is trippfamilymedicine.com, and that'll give you a lot of good information or even allow you to download new patient information, the forms that you need to get going if you come visit us. The Facebook account is Tripp Family Medicine, and you can communicate with us that way. If you got questions or ideas, we're happy to see those as posts on Facebook. And then the easy way is our phone number is 208-933-4400. That's 933-4400.
You had just a quick comment, I know, about the caller mentioned her love of especially cold pressed olive oil, which sounds fascinating. By the way, I'm gonna have to try that.
Yeah, cold pressed. I think really the interest in cold press versus regular processing is, by the name it tells you, well, there must be some heat involvement in regular olive oil processing, and the cold press idea is that you're leaving as many of the nutrients in the olive oil as possible. What's interesting is she was saying she uses it for cooking and just about everything and spreading it on bread and likes the taste. What's interesting is I use olive oil in a dermatology point of view. When people have really dry skin, I teach them to use that after a shower, put it on even before you towel dry, and it's amazingly quick to change dry or really eczematous skin into a pretty nice skin. I learned that from a dermatologist in windy Casper, Wyoming,
Yes.
where everybody's skin is dry.
Yeah, it's a little windy there at times.
Well, we were talking a little bit off the air about this cold pressed or just raw foods idea. That's another trend. We talk about, like we were talking about broccoli and how it's the trend of broccoli over the last 10 or 15 years is, to eat it raw or very lightly cooked, whereas when I was a kid, my mom cooked it to death, and then she tried to put lemon juice on it or something else so we'd eat it. But, all the nutrients, or a lot of them, were left in that water she threw out in the sink. So getting closer to fresher, more raw foods is definitely a trend that I think is helpful in promoting, better nutrient intake from what you actually eat. A big one is just organic in general, or what are called non-GMO foods. GMO stands for genetically modified organism. And so this isn't just about the foods. I mean, one of the fun GMOs is what are called spider goats. It's a genetically modified goat that Utah State University has developed to produce milk that has kind of a synthetic spider silk so that they create material with a tensile strength that's stronger than steel. And so there's a GMO that I think is a very fun development. Not that I want necessarily those goats running around my yard. I don't know what they'll do with the rest of their silk, but there's a lot of interest in these things, and I'm not saying that one is really better than the other. I think the interest in paying attention and getting the information accurately as to what is safe, what is not, is very wise. And we have a ton of in our farming community that they are using GMOs and some that are not. And the truth is, I'm not here to preach one side or the other. I'm just trying to tell you that there is a trend, and I think it's helpful for us to look at evidence, because that's my training, is to say, what's the evidence, not just what's the hearsay. In fact, if I can say one thing about information, just because it's written, just because it's on the internet, does not mean it's true. You get a lot of opinions. You even get books that are published by experts, or what I'll call pseudo experts, that are absolutely one side of a question or another. And the truth is, you got to look at your source. So that's one of the helpful things to say. Is a trend really a good thing for me? Well, let's look at the evidence. That's where I'm coming from as a physician.
Want to mention it's 8:48. It's 78 at our studio, and of course, if you have a comment or question for the doctor, 736-0300. You though have a bit more when it comes to trends that you've got to touch on today as well.
I have more than I know what to do with.
Yes.
But that's hopefully how I prepare each time we have these Wednesday morning conversations. Here's a fun one: sleep therapy, or snoring for years or decades has been, oh, that's just annoying. But really, now we look at snoring and say, is there really underlying sleep apnea, which has lots of ramifications about how you feel, your depression, heart troubles, potentials for stroke, high blood pressure, lots of things that sleep apnea we don't even know is affecting us and can go on for years. My dad suffered from that, and I had no idea until, I became a physician, that that's what my dad was suffering from.
Mhm.
We just thought it was normal for, an old 40-year-old to fall asleep when he's driving at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So sleep apnea has a lot of effects. Exercise. Here, let me give you some decade specific ones. The 70s, it was all about distance running. That's when Reebok and Nike were,
Mhm.
first on the scene. The 80s went to aerobics. If you remember the leg warmers and the leotards. So aerobics was obviously mainly for women, and it took a long time to get men involved, but that was probably the biggest in the 80s. 90s became the home fitness machines. Although it'd been around longer, Nordic Track and ThighMaster and things like that became big deals. Today we're a little more emphasized on cross training, and we use a lot of these, the running, the aerobics type exercises, which have mostly been converted into names like dance, or Zumba is a favorite around.
Mhm.
Plyometrics, which is plyometrics is more complex than saying jumping, but there's a lot of kind of almost a jumping jacks type exercises that go with it. And the latest is vibrating platforms.
I've
To,
seen those in action.
to
I have stood upon them, and
have you?
yeah.
Okay. I was surprised to see, major university, and that's what got me to look at it a little more in detail. But they where my daughter went to a track conference, or a track uh, summer camp, very top level Division I NCAA, usually national competitor for national championships in track. They have several machines that when their athletes finish their workout, they get on for about 3 minutes. And all I can say is it jiggles you enough that I think it relaxes everything, and that's their main emphasis, is to avoid further injuries because of tight muscles.
I did a radio show one time from one of these places where they have the machine set up, and they brought in a couple of women who were regular customers, and they had been walking around for years with canes, and because of the treatment, and MS patients and the like, all found that they were getting more mobility afterward. So I
Wow.
was
No, that's
simply amazed that you just put your feet on this thing or you sit on it, and any number of positions you can take. And
and I'm not here to sell the machine. The truth is this is something that if I was going to spend $1,500 on, I'd want a little bit of evidence behind it rather than a few testimonials, of the lady with the cane that now runs. That's it's like maybe she really does, and maybe that is the cause, but has it worked for multiple people? And that's where your evidence is important. Another trend that's really big right now is among employers and insurance companies to put together a wellness program. It is often insurance company driven, but the idea is that the employee, if they'll adhere to some basic ideas and of general wellness, that they can get a discount on their monthly premium for their insurance. And sometimes there's not a whole lot to it other than a little bit of blood work once a year to prove that your cholesterol is not crazy and your blood sugar hasn't gone crazy and your blood pressure is okay. And so sometimes it's a minimal participation, and other times you have to show that you're showing up to the gym, twice a week or more to get that deeper discount. And I think that's one that seems to be a natural, common sense. Wow, that should make sense. That should work. Why shouldn't that save money and save insurance costs? And yet, I heard recently on a national radio program that they had some, attorney, insurance company attorney arguing that we don't have the evidence. These are not proven yet. People are putting a lot of money into them, but we really got to see what the evidence is. And so, on one side, I agree that the evidence is important, but the other side is, if somebody keeps their cholesterol down, keeps their blood sugar down, keeps their blood pressure down, and is exercising on a regular basis, they're doing most of the things I, as a physician, would tell them to do. And I don't think we need a lot of extra evidence or studies to say if you do this, you're going to have a healthier population. So sometimes common sense rules, in my opinion.
I have a friend who's actually he's 71, I believe. He's taken up yoga for the first time in his life and says that it made a dramatic difference in his life the last few months. And he said it was nothing he would have ever considered before, but his wife got him interested in it, and now he's going 3 days a week to classes.
Wow, that's a big change at 71.
Yeah.
Yoga, traditionally is thought of as, skinny 30-something-year-olds on a mat somewhere in, cute outfits. But the truth is yoga is a great increased range of motion type of exercise. It is more strenuous than most people understand.
And he admitted that, but he said he's also had some steady weight loss. Back feels better. He had some back issues, and his inner core seems to be stronger from all of it.
Yeah, and my only caution on taking up yoga would be like any other exercise. Start mild. Don't try to take whatever the highest level is and start there, because it'll wear you out. There's some popular workout videos. One's called P90X, and now they have sequels to that. But they do a yoga routine that getting halfway through for anybody that isn't really athletically fit is tough. So yoga can be very strenuous or it can be very soft and mild, and I think that's a great choice.
When we talk a little bit about all of these trends that have come about, I mean they're all related to it's sort of like the total. You point out that we're now doing a lot more cross training, but it's got to involve diet, it's got to involve exercise, it's got to involve healthy sleep. So it's much more of a systemic approach, I guess, to what we're doing than we used to do.
Yeah, we have traditionally picked one area and said this will cure me, and the truth is if that's the only area you need improvement in, it does make you better. But really, the motivation to seek out a trend or follow is to improve. And you know, especially when you get motivated salespeople selling a product or a program, boy, they are going to make that look like it'll cure you. It's the panacea. But the truth is get the background, see if it actually makes sense. Is there common sense to it? And is it risking your health? If it's not, try it.
We've got I think, time for one last caller for either a quick question or comment. It's coming up on 8:57, 79 at the studios, and you're on Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine and Top Story. No, maybe not. Maybe they figured they didn't have enough time to get the question in. We're coming up to about a minute to go. Any closing thoughts?
One that's separate from what we've talked about. 2 weeks ago, we talked about dehydration and heat. And we are in a heat wave for our area. This is very hot. Drink more than you normally think you'd drink. Make sure it's mostly water, a little bit of salt, a little bit of sugar maybe. And don't be in the heat unless you need to. This morning was a great time to go walking, but about noon, it won't be such a good time to go walking.
I find that in this part of the country, that the mornings are very comfortable, where if you were in the Tidewater region where I used to live, it's always sticky in the morning on a hot day too as well. But here, the temperatures are very mild at
Yeah.
7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, early in the morning up till probably 9 or 10 is a beautiful time to be out and get your yard work done. But right now, be cautious.
We will see Russell next week, right?
Correct.
All right. Want to thank Dr. Jonathan Tripp for joining us in studio today. Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. And of course, we have a guest coming up, I believe, from the Twin Falls City Council in a few minutes. Also, a letter writer to the Idaho Press Tribune has some thoughts about global warming and suggests that we're ignoring a lot of the main causes, much to our own detriment. If we get a chance, I'd like to talk about that as well coming up in the next hour. This is Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, but first, Fox News at 9 o'clock.